It's what you all been waiting for.
What's up, guys? So it's been just over a year since we bought the 2018 Mustang. We bought it last December, and I figured now's a good time to go ahead and do a one-year review on the car. Talk about what kind of problems I may or may not have had over this past year. Does this car have the tick or not? Talk a little bit about how I feel about the 10R80 transmission. And basically, is the 2018 Mustang GT worth it if you're in the market, or should you just get a 15 to 17 GT? But before we get into all of that, let's just take a quick look at what we've done with the car over this past year. Alright guys, so as you could see, we've definitely had a blast with this car in the past year. We've done some modifications to the car, but most importantly, I wanted to show you guys that, we go out and we use this car, we push it to its limits. It's been to multiple track days so far this year. It's been to the drag strip multiple times. We have the nitrous on there now. We've ran an entire bottle of nitrous through it. We've hit it with a 50 shot. We've hit it with a 100 shot. So I just wanted to make the point that we've definitely, put this car through its paces, and we've, pushed it through its limits over this past year. It does only have, right around 4,000, 5,000 miles on it. I'm not even exactly sure. I'd have to look. But keep in mind that I would say 80% of those miles are on track, going to the drag strip back and forth. I mean, we don't really drive this car a whole lot. I have the 350R that I also track. We have the 2016 F-150 that I drive around daily. So this car doesn't get driven around a whole lot on the street, but it does get driven around on the street. But mostly it gets, when it gets driven hard. So let's talk about issues. So since we got the car, actually right away when we first bought the car, actually driving home from the dealership the day we bought it, the check engine light came on. So of course I made an appointment to bring it right back to the dealership. Turned out it had a code for a faulty knock sensor. That actually did turn out to be somewhat of a nightmare. The knock sensor, actually not the knock sensor, the intake gaskets, which they had to change to get to the knock sensor, because they have to pull the intake manifold. The intake gaskets were on back order, and it took probably about a month I had to drive around with the check engine light on before they got the intake gaskets for me, which by the time they got the intake gaskets, they swapped them out, swapped out the knock sensors. The code actually came right back up. Long story short, it actually turned out that there was a I don't know if there was a harness unplugged or there was a missing pin in one of the pigtails, but that was the reason why it was getting the faulty knock sensor. So, you know, that whole process took about a month and a half to finally sort out. But it wasn't a huge deal. It was just, like I said, they had to either, you know, plug in a harness that wasn't plugged in or replace a pin on one of the harnesses. That itself actually turned into another issue. So when I got the car back from the dealer, I had already had my first track day booked at Talladega GP, which is about 4 hours from the Nashville, Tennessee area, which is where I live. So I drove the car down there about 4 hours, like I said. Car performed excellent on the track all day long. I was doing, I think it was the last session of the day actually, I started noticing smoke billowing out from underneath the hood. So of course I got off track immediately, popped the hood and noticed that the radiator was leaking. So that was quite a nightmare. I ended up stuck at the track till about 10, 11 o'clock at night waiting on my truck and trailer to come pick me up because I had drove there, like I said. Brought the car back to the dealership, of course, and turns out the technician that did the install on the knock sensors and the intake manifold actually lost a hose clamp, and it got lodged between the radiator and the cooling fan. And eventually on track, it worked its way and popped a hole in the radiator. So that issue there was caused 100% by the technician, and needless to say, I will not be bringing my car back to that dealer for any work. As far as the tick's concerned, I have yet to hear the tick on this car. Hopefully it stays that way, but if it doesn't, if the car develops the tick and it starts to become a real concern, most likely I'll just return the car to stock and trade it in. So I'm not super worried about it, and that's my advice to anybody else that's out there. And if you do have the tick and you've already tuned it and you're worried your warranty's void, if you're super concerned about it, return the car to stock, trade it in, go get another one. I mean, cut your losses now. That's the best advice I could give you on that. But let's do a little cold start real quick, and just to show you guys that I don't currently have the tick, and like I said, hopefully it stays that way. So other than that, the only other issue that I had with the car so far was I did have a software update that needed to be done. I kept getting a prompt on the screen to service the tire inflation kit. Apparently there was some kind of TSB for that, but like I said, it was simply a software update that needed to be done. They plugged into the car. It took them about 20-30 minutes to reflash it, and I haven't had that issue since. Okay, so now what about the 10R80 transmission? Well, let me just say that the 10R80 transmission is an absolutely fantastic transmission, especially for drag racing. It keeps the car in the power band 100% of the time. It rolls through the gears smooth as butter. If you're into drag racing and drag racing only, the 10R80 is a no-brainer. Now, with that said, would I get the 10R80 transmission again if I had the option? And the answer is no, I wouldn't. The reason for that is again, I'm primarily a track guy. I do a lot of drag racing too. I love drag racing, always have, but I like to track my cars, and the 10R80 definitely has some shortcomings on track. Number one, if you don't have a trans cooler installed on the car, it's going to overheat. The trans is going to overheat when pushed. Another thing is there's just, in my opinion, there's too many gears for a track car. what happens is you know, when you're coming down a long straightaway and you're doing, you know, you're in one of the higher gears, you know, 7th, 8th gear, you know, it's just a lot of downshifting to have to do, you know, before, you know, a corner. If the straightaway leads into a tight corner, you could have to downshift 5-6 times. And that definitely takes away from some of your concentration on track. And I know you could say, well, why don't you just leave it and drive and let the car do the shifting? Well, number one, that's just not as fun. And number two, actually there's some problems with that too, as I've tried that. And unfortunately, and I think this also comes back to there being too many gears, is when you're rolling your speed through a corner, and as you start to roll onto the gas to, you know, accelerate out of the corner, it wants to downshift still, which, you know, when the car's set up and stable coming out of a corner, the last thing you want it to do when you're trying to roll onto the gas is downshift and upset the car. So I found that it just doesn't work well at all when leaving it in drive if you're actually pushing the car. So again, the 10R80 is an absolutely fantastic transmission, and I love drag racing with it, and it is by far the most enjoyable automatic transmission that I've ever experienced, other than very little experience that I've had driving a Porsche with a dual clutch transmission or the PDK. But other than that, it's the most enjoyable automatic transmission that I've ever had. It is a great transmission, but you know, if I have the option again, or like when the GT500 comes out, if there's an option 10-speed or manual, I'm going to get the manual. All right, so the question is the 18 and up GT really worth it, or should you just get a 15 to 17 GT? And to answer that, I would first ask you, is performance your main goal? Are you going to be chasing ETs? Or are you maybe less concerned with performance? Maybe you wouldn't mind saving a few bucks. Maybe you just want a fun car that you can go out, maybe modify a little bit, still have a really quick car. If you fall into that latter category, I would say save yourself some money and go out and get yourself a 15 to 17 GT. Still a great car. If it's performance that you're after, you want to go out and chase a 10-second time slip, then definitely 18 and up is the way to go, in my opinion. In my experience, it takes a full bolt-on E85 15 to 17 car just to beat a stock 18 GT. I've seen this more than once. I've seen it at least 2-3 times already. And then if you were to add full bolt-ons and E85 to an 18 and up car, lots of people have already gone well into the 10s with that setup. And in my opinion, you're going to need a power adder or some serious weight reduction to a 15 to 17 car to match that. So in the performance argument, you could say that, you know, that money saved is probably going to be spent anyway. You know, that money that you would save from buying a 15 to 17 car, if you're going to go out and chase a 10-second time slip, I mean, just full bolt-ons and E85 tune, you're looking at least $5,000 and that's if you do all the work yourself to get your 15 to 17 car just where a stock 18 GT would be. So a lot of the money that you may save would go right into modding the car just to get it to where a stock 18 GT would be. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this 1-year review video on our 2018 Mustang GT. We've had a ton of fun with this car last year, and we plan to have a ton of fun with it again this year. Also, stay tuned to the channel, guys, because we have also recently hit the 2-year mark with the 350R. So I am going to be doing a 2-year review on that as well. And I appreciate you guys watching and subscribing to the channel. Those of you that aren't subscribed, please do so. And thanks for watching, guys.
Bring